All right, so we're calling to order the special meeting of the Civic Center Advisory Committee on October 20th, 2014 at 4:30 p.m. in the council chambers. We'll do a roll call. So the chair is here. Dostart Fisher. Here. Howe. Here. Lively. Here. Meridew. Here. Tonelli. Present. And David is excused. And council member liaison DeVolia, I don't know if Rick's coming in. Does anybody know? Okay.
No.
And Lewis.
I'm here.
Right. And we have Paul and George and Gordon here. Thank you. And Mr. Gordon, no. Okay. So today's agenda, we are covering the RFP and its exhibits, which also happens to include item number 4, the project schedule. I think what might be good is if Gordon would be willing to take us through what the process has been to this point and what our goals are for today and where we are.
Thank you. First, my apologies. You can share, I guess. My apologies, I've been a little bit under the weather, so I might not have jumped on this quite as well as, yeah, that's right. Good idea, exactly. George was like 20 feet from me before. But between Paul and I, we were on the phone on Friday and working over the weekend, so we hope we've captured, and I want to thank the chair for the suggestion that we use track changes to make life easier on all of you.
Thank you.
That was great.
So we changed the RFP. Mine is the front end, the short part, and then Paul's got the long part, including the schedule. I would note, by the way, the schedule needs some more changes to it, especially events that have already occurred. We haven't necessarily matched them up with the dates that we actually did the work, but that's, it doesn't affect anything, but it should be corrected just for the record. So we will not make sure, and going forward, of course, we'll have to make sure that the scheduled items match the actual documentation. The last thing I should note is in conversation communication from the city attorney regarding the sample agreement, which the committee has asked to be attached as an attachment, which typically we do so that the consultant may take exception to items in the contract, and then they're worked out with the city attorney, who always reserves the right to use the just say no concept and say, hey, if you want to work for us, this is the contract design. But we can usually work things out. In any case, we have we don't have a generic contract in there. We had the contract that was used for map 5 that Paul works for in there. I have here, and I'm not quite a third of the way through, correcting it to make it a generic for architects. And so I will take notes on all of the concepts all of you have to make sure they're included in here. But even I will draft the contract. That's done by the city attorney. So any concepts you want, that's fine. I'll take them, pass them on to the city attorney. He will then make the changes, and then I'll bring it back to the committee for your review. But ultimately, he's the one that gets to make the wording choices, not us. But your comments and concepts are more than welcome. Paul and I have already been discussing, and the one major area where we expect there may be some concerns by some of the architects, but that's in the area where, although in each phase they're going to be required to give us a cost estimate validated by Paul and his team, if when the project gets open, the bids get open rather, if the project is X% over, and we'll have to decide what X is. We were talking, and I suggested 5%. So we keep a contingency of 5%, but if the bids came in over that, we would require the architect, since they were the ones responsible for doing the estimating, selecting the materials, coming up with the sizes, we would make them responsible for redrawing the project at no additional cost to the town, and then preparing the documents so it can go out and rebid. So having get all that.
Can I get a little, so what I wanted to do is just review a little bit of process and thank Clive and Elizabeth for laboring through 2 very long meetings on the RFP and the scope. I think after you guys left last time, we spent 2.5 more hours, and that followed another meeting where we spent at least the amount of time of that magnitude. So your subcommittee has been hard at work. We may not got it entirely right, but probably invested between reading and reviewing and meeting and reading again and coming again. Somewhere, we're probably getting up close to 8 to 10 hours apiece on this
And
thing.
I think we owe, thanks to
Yes.
Paul for being so patient
Yes.
with our nitpicking of the language and syntax, and,
Yes,
We'll get it right.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
And so there are 4 there's one document with 4 exhibits here. Thank you, Rick. And so my instinct is to take them one at a time. And starting with the first one, the actual RFP is the 8-page document. It has our town logo on the front. And just to see if people have, open it for discussion, if people had, were there things they wanted to see further revised, or there comments or questions people had?
I've got some comments.
Yes.
Okay, this is the RFP. I'm getting a little confused about the underground garage. Is it in or out? Page 4, there are approximately 100 off-street parking spaces available to the public, plus a secured police lot for police parking, and then you delete it, which may be located in the underground garage. But in the following,
Can I answer?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So the section 3 is dealing with the existing site.
okay.
So there is no underground garage in the existing site.
Okay, so site location description is what exists now. Okay.
Yeah, that's what it was intended to be.
Okay,
So that's why we moved it to the section below when we talked about what the plan is.
okay.
So that's the reason.
That makes sense.
It was just an error the first time. We realized that we were, yeah.
Okay. And then in scope of services, so are we limiting the ad alts to the 4 items?
No, the adults should be, they should be all of the adults that were in the HMC cost estimate as listed as adults. I
Okay,
believe there were 7,
right,
8 of those, 10 of those, plus whichever additional ones the committee chooses. The ones, I believe, that have been suggested by the Green Building Committee were, LEED compliant design up to platinum, zero net energy. Now, I added zero net water, and it's only been discussed, I think, at the subcommittee level. Or actually, maybe I introduced it at the last meeting, but it wasn't, you really didn't discuss it, so that should be part of your discussion today. And then utility undergrounding, which I added after a discussion with George some months ago, wherein we could use funds that are available from PG&E for doing any necessary utility work on site. And so we should discuss that also at the appropriate time.
well, I'm looking at page 4, scope of services, and I guess, I am a little confused. It says scope of services. The second sentence, other potential areas of interest are an underground garage for police parking and use. And then you put deleted areas of interest are an underground garage. So it's in there, but it looks like it's deleted or not.
It is not deleted. I think that was, I previously had it in, I may have stricken it down and realized I wanted it in here with the additional phrase for police parking and use.
Okay, so that's not deleted.
Correct.
So other
Do we,
potential,
excuse me, can I just interject there? Do we want to include for staff and police
Yeah.
parking
Yeah.
and use? Because
Why do
it's
you have
not
a limitation
specifically.
on police?
Yeah, well, that's.
George, we were gonna add, that was one of our questions that the subcommittee had
But I
kind of
think
come
one of
back
the
to.
thoughts, one of the thoughts is that certainly if we do an underground garage, the police parking would be underground and not on the
Yeah.
surface. And that would be, something that would be, it would make the grounds more attractive overall and free up some more open space. But also for staff to park on ground, not necessarily for residents or users unless they wanted to. And they obviously could, but we wouldn't be, providing the amount of parking.
Well, if it's police parking, it has to be secured.
Yes, of
So
course.
there would be different issues there as to how big it is and whether or
Right.
not it's police parking.
But that wasn't driven by the subcommittee, so I think the
No.
subcommittee was just curious why staff made that change. I'm sure there was a reason, or it was maybe just got in. We don't know why the word pool. To be on page 4, paragraph 4B, scope of services, on the 4th line, third word in is capital police.
Okay.
We didn't know whether that said that as opposed to staff.
It can be staff, but The and use then would need to be modified, but it could just be staff parking and use.
I think that, because I don't remember us ever saying it's just police.
No.
I remember us saying the public doesn't really want to park down there.
I'm fine with
Okay.
changing it to staff. I think that
Police
the,
has to be security.
yeah, the only difference, if we were to say other than staff, would be that with the public, you then introduce other issues. But
Yeah,
staff,
So we're not barring the public at this point.
Yeah,
They would just say staff parking,
I
yeah.
mean, if you want it, the most open would be
But, so
parking
I think
and
Dee
use.
has a really good point, however.
Yeah.
I don't object to police parking,
Yeah, I mean-
police being called
Right,
out,
right.
because that entails a different level of security, right?
Yeah.
And which then would potentially,
Sure, we could say, is there a reason not to say staff and police
Or
parking?
police and staff parking.
Well, George got us to say administration and police
Okay.
religiously, so if we,
Would be
yeah.
parallel.
Yes, to be
but
parallel.
administration versus police.
So, but staff and police parking would be,
Do we actually need to specify that? Couldn't we just, what we're
To
really
say
talking
interesting.
about is the sort of experience that these architects have. And we specifically mentioned we'd like to see if they have experience with underground parking.
yes.
So could we just limit it to, do you have underground parking experience?
So it's a
Oh,
scope of services.
Yeah, where does it say that? I mean, I'm confused by the language, scope of service, first, scope of services, other potential areas of interest. What does that mean? The areas of interest, is it in or is it out? Do you want it, do you want them to do it, or do you not want them to do it? What do you mean?
We're
it's
saying that
potential?
there's a possibility,
in
and it's
the-
not that it's an absolute.
In the,
Are they bidding on it?
in the scope of services, we go into it in detail. And they're going to give a certain number of iterations with parking and without. And this is just to give them a flavor of what would it mean. Whereas I think it's meant to be fairly open and conceptual of.
This
right.
first several pages, the first 9
Yeah.
pages.
It's not just something, other potential areas
Because
would be.
when you get to the pages 1 through 19, the scope of services really
It's
gets
very
very
specific,
detailed.
yes.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah,
But
So
I-
let's not get hung up on.
But this would be an
That's
appropriate place if you don't want, lead up to platinum, zero net energy, zero net water, and utility undergrounding, I'd rather take it out here. But if
well, it
you
just says
say-
they're gonna look at the range.
Can I ask a question? Rose, may I interrupt you?
Yeah.
Okay, I've already got mission creep looking at this entire thing. In other words, the budget's going the wrong way. We've added in underground utilities, and I understand the issue, Elizabeth, that we have money, but we also have a political
That's not what I
problem.
was saying.
That is, maybe some other street in town wants that money, so I think we gotta be real careful with that underground utility money.
That's not,
It says right here, undergrounding utilities. And it's not clear if it's on Fair Oaks or if it's in the project. So it's not clear how big the number is. And believe me, I'm gonna be all over these numbers. All right? I'm gonna treat
Just to
this
keep in
money
mind, guys,
like-
all this is saying that the
it's asking for.
areas of interest means we're going to look at what would it do to the design and what would it do to the cost if we consider these things. That's it. There's no commitment to doing them.
Right.
It's
Well-
just so that the council, this group and the council will have the tools to make an informed decision based on what they know at the time. It's no promises, it's not, we're gonna go LEED platinum or net zero water or anything. It's consistent with what we've been discussing, but yes, the utilities is a new one. That hadn't been on the list of alternates before.
Right.
And that, so, but there's no commitment to doing it. I think we were just trying to be respectful to staff that it's been kicked around for a while, but
Underground utilities.
Oh, the underground, using somebody else's money to help do the underground?
Not our money, PG needs money.
Yeah,
No, but Kitty's point's right, there might be other sections of the town that would want to use that
No, the
money.
PG&E money, I think, comes from taxes, or PG&E
Yes,
money put
it's
aside
Title I
specifically
Title
for
I.
projects in
Rule 28
Atherton.
money.
It's actually, it's money paid by ratepayers to
Yes.
PG&E that PUC then requires them to sequester.
Right.
So it's not tax money.
But there are people in town who have asked in the past. to
I have, actually,
Okay,
for
have-
my
have
Emily
asked,
Street, yes, I did.
And so I think we
came to
need to be
council
very careful
asked.
about using that
and I was
money
shut down.
unless we're going to, prioritize or do something to make people think that their issue will be heard on their street.
well, the amount of money that we've got in the PG&E Rule 28 is about $1.2 million.
I know, and it doesn't do much. I understand.
That's
all of
about
that.
200 feet.
Believe me, I understand all of that, but I still think there are people in town that don't. And we have been asked.
wouldn't it be nice if, sorry.
Wouldn't it be
I think
nice
so.
if we could underground it all? But that's a whole different issue.
Yes.
And I have an idea of how that could be done, but that's outside of the scope of this project.
If you wish to have it taken out, that's fine. If in the process of design, they say, hey, we have to bring the utilities from here to here, and that's gonna cost X, that could then come back to the council, and the council would decide, do you wanna make that a Rule 28 project? If, you know.
Rule 28, I mean, you might know already from your time on the council as well, it's restricted in terms of its use. It can only be used
It's like the library fund.
for major thoroughfare, major town type projects.
Yeah.
It can't be used to do private projects.
That would give us two locations to consider.
Well, given that this is not mentioned in the.
It could be removed.
In the detailed scope of work, that, you know,
It could be
19 pages.
removed. It's-
I
we can
suggest
still
we
look
just
at
take
it.
out.
It doesn't, if people feel it's too controversial, we
Are
just
you
take it
okay
out.
with that?
Oh,
Make
yeah,
it simple.
I don't think it's,
budget of council.
We don't know that yet.
I think it could go, to me,
we're
it's,
not, we're not saying we're gonna do it, we're just asking if they have any.
and the architects aren't gonna
I don't
draw
care
an
what
alternate anyway, it's just, yeah. Okay, so Matt, why don't we pull it out, so, because it hadn't been discussed
So then we're
before.
stopping with net energy and net water design, is that?
Period, yeah.
Right.
Okay. It doesn't mean we don't care about this topic, it just
In the
means it's
net
not gonna be
estimate,
addressed here.
So
Yes.
we're still on the front part that says, tell us if you have experience doing this. It doesn't commit us to doing any one of those levels.
Correct.
That's exactly right.
Correct, it just says be prepared to prevent alternates.
Well, actually, we have, if I may, we have gone one step further. We've said, incorporate
In your proposal.
in your proposal as, and then we would negotiate, but in your proposal and factor in the cost to take the analysis through schematic design. So they have to give some thought to it, and so they'll have to put some, you know, dollar amount, hours of effort into doing anything that's here with those, I can't remember if it's 8, add alternates and any that are here. Once it goes through schematic design, you will get the next iteration of the cost estimate. I would say similar to what you got last time, but the significant difference is, then the designers actually said, oh, it's gonna be this big or this tall or whatever, as opposed to, well, let's assume, you know, this number, which they couldn't do any more than that at the time. So you'll have, as Chair Dossard said, you'll be better informed to make a decision. From that point forward, if any of these add alternates are not selected, there's no cost to them. There would be no design cost, and therefore, obviously, no construction cost.
I think I made a mistake by just saying there were any global comments on this whole thing, because we have a lot of pages to go through. So maybe just backing up, maybe we'll start back with, does any, just because I think we're literally gonna go through every page, and then people can put up their hand if they have a comment. So, any comments on the cover page, I'm gonna guess we're okay with that. Okay, and then,
Some of these are global questions.
yeah, you know, that's okay, but bring them up. Any other global questions?
Oh, I have about 4.
Do you wanna bring them up now, or after we go through detailed comments?
I think that maybe we need to talk, they're global, so there's a detailed comment I will wait and ask for
Okay.
time. One of my concerns is, and I think this is something that the subcommittee can answer, I've asked Gordon, I want to make sure that every point we need to, or should be, we want Paul and his team's input on budget. I don't think we can ask too many times for that for this project, because I think it's a good idea to have the architects know that if this thing comes in X% over, they're gonna have to redo it on their own time. But what worries me, if that happens, I think the community is gonna look at us and say, you guys have failed, you've done it again, it's too big, it's too expensive, we're not gonna do it. So I wanna make sure that we have built in more than we think we need, or more than you might think we need, or more than George thinks we need, points to double check and triple check to come back with numbers that are really
Great.
Comment.
Yeah.
So along the way, most of our estimates have a contingency. When you're early in the design process, everything's not nailed down, bigger contingency. It's like you don't know where the design's going, so throw a fudge factor on it. As you get towards construction documents, more of it's known, that number goes down. So we've got that factor to work with as the design develops. The other issue is the economy. As this project gets ready to go out onto the street, right now we're predicting that the economy is still going up. What we think things will cost today is going to be different a year or a year and a half from now. And so some of that is a moving target, and therefore we'll need to plan. If we see the escalation ramping up too much, we may need to put in more options for contingency. If we think that it's gonna be 10% higher than our last estimate, plug in that these things are add alternates and not necessarily part of the scope, so that we can immediately say, we're not accepting that one to get it into budget, even though it's out to bid, rather than having to go to the exaggerated step of redrawing the whole set of documents to get it within budget. Both of them are practical ways to go about it, one's just a little less painful.
Paul, can I just interject? I think, well, those are very good points, but I think what this document, I think, brings out time and time again is that we state in here, this is a budget-driven project. And I think we make that point at every phase through the design process. Conceptual design, schematic design, design development, construction documents. That point and your involvement in vetting the cost estimate, I believe, is made over and over again. But that was, I think, one of the points that Dee Dee was trying to get to. So is that an accurate statement?
That it's a budget-driven project and there.
No,
That
that
literally
it states,
wrote into
that
it.
it states in here, A, it's a budget-driven project, and B, the architect is expected to produce an estimate and then work that estimate with you to ensure that it is accurate.
Yes, we
Yeah.
put that into the first page and at the conclusion or the beginning of each subsequent phase.
Okay, so Dee Dee, does that sort of get to what you were trying to?
I just think from day one at our interviews, we need to make sure these folks understand that. I have no faith in architects, I'm sorry, Rose. But I have had such bad experiences with architects going on their own planet to do things. Couldn't care less about the money that's been put out there. I just feel really strongly that in this case, we only want to do this once. We're only going to have one chance. And if we flub it, there's a lot of wasted time and money.
That's why you hired us.
Dee Dee, what other global comments did you want to address?
Let's see. Well, I guess I can do the underground, yeah, that's in the scope. I guess my other question is verifying of space. We've been asking this for months, and I want to make sure that we shouldn't be verifying our space needs before we hire an architect. I've had a conversation with Gordon tried to cut me out of it, but I just hate to spend money on things we don't have to spend money on. You'll see I have one thing, and it's spending money, because I'm gonna take this money that we get from people very, I'm not gonna waste a penny on it if we can, right? So I just wonder if we shouldn't be verifying these space needs before, so the architect has a program that has been verified that we say, this is it.
How would you do it? What would it be an alternative way?
Well, I mean, I see 3,000 or 4,000 square feet of space sitting around these buildings that, in my mind, a lot of them are duplicative. I don't know how, but I guess Gordon's point to me was, well, how do you know until you know where the things are gonna be identified as to whether or not they will be available to X or Y, and, can they be shared? And my reaction is, well, some of these are gonna be decisions that this group has to make. And should we make it before?
But what would the process look like, is what I'm guessing, is what I'm trying to get at. Would you hire a consultant?
Or hire anybody? I mean, we don't have to spend money on everything with consultants, folks. I think that there's a council chamber, there's a police training facility, there is this space, and there is the library. Isn't that something that we all can sit down with the numbers and look at the uses and say, here's what could work?
I think that's what the Blue Ribbon Task Force and the Town Center Task Force tried to do. And they both concluded that when they got into space planning, then they would be able to really look at the pieces and then say, this looks excessive, this looks reasonable, this looks too tight. But I don't know how you do it without a space plan. And just from a professional standpoint, like until you do the programming and then lay it out, I don't know, and it gets into the shape of the buildings and all kinds of, how do they relate to each other and everything else. I don't know how you do it without an architect.
Can I just interject there, because I thought that the process was, since agency, we went through the master plan scenario, and they did a lot of vetting and programming of square footages, and we've got, ballpark numbers, and we know that there's some overlap in spaces that could be shared. And once the design of the building starts taking place, with that in mind, to create as many shared and flexible spaces as can possibly be created through an architectural design that would be where we hone it down and hone it down. And, you know, and not to duplicate meeting rooms or training rooms that go unused. Like we were at the EOC the other morning. And the EOC is gonna be in the police training environment, because you don't use that all the time, obviously. And the duplication would be, other uses of that facility would be other things that the police use. And so I just think that's something that we direct the architects to be very, very cautious about, and do not create grand lobbies and soaring staircases like City Hall, you know, things like
I
that.
think we're putting a lot of decisions on architects because we don't want to make the hard decisions.
Well, that's not true. That's not true. I don't think that's true.
I'd comment too, I mean, we did this previously,
Yeah.
and this room doesn't really count. I mean, it's not gonna be rehabilitated right now, it's an extra. So, I don't know what's gonna happen with this room, nobody knows. I do have a comment on that when we get into the scope, because it is one of the extras to be able to rehabilitate this building.
Whether or not it's used.
But
for
the library doesn't
library.
include a general purpose room. That was excluded in us doing
That was
the
1,200 square feet.
9,000
Well, it
square
still
feet.
shows a little blip on the picture.
It was an additive,
All right.
but I thought the EOC and the police training room were overlapped as one.
Yeah,
And the council chambers is a separate room.
right.
I mean, we could talk about whether that should be combined,
Well,
but
my
my guess
goal
is
was
it
just
should.
keep moving.
asking this was,
Yeah.
this came up last December when we got the first estimates that shocked everybody. And we said, okay, we gotta look at the admin and police numbers,
Right,
and we have to have the library revalidate the numbers. We've done nothing towards that.
Because we said we would do it when we hired an architect.
We didn't
That's-
say that then, but
I
that's
think
what
we
we're
did.
saying
I think
now.
it's in the minutes. No, I think that's in the minutes. I think that was
And that's what
very clearly articulated.
your committee,
Yeah,
I remember very clearly the phone call.
yeah. No, it was us.
Everybody-
That's what we
I don't know.
requested.
I didn't say that. I've been
Well, it's what
expecting it
ended
all
up in the
this time.
minutes, that's what I remembered as well, but I don't know how else we do it other than, because we did a peer review where we just looked at just a phone, survey of, call the head of the police and say how many square feet are in your police station, how many people you have, and how many people, it was very cursory. And then you start to get into how efficient is a layout, is how many private, it really will come down to space planning. And I think that's the moment where we will have to very seriously look at space plans and say, does this feel efficient? And it very clearly articulated in this scope of services is space, not just building envelopes and site planning and space plans come to this group. We don't pick chairs, but we do look at space plans. We look at walls and doors and counters and, how do the departments relate to each other? We're gonna be looking at that with a very keen eye of, could this be more effective? Is this the identity our town wants to have? When you walk in, should it feel like
All of
this?
our professional experience to bear on that.
Yeah.
Rose's example, professional experience.
Well, I guess the concern maybe is just handing over the architects what we have now, and they think that that's what it is. And the validation process is, how do you see that fall if you're handling something that we don't really know is what we need or want? Would you say to them, go with this, or, start interviewing? Or
Well,
who
just
do
to
they
be
talk
clear,
to?
what we're officially giving them is all the prior work that Blue Ribbon Task Force, Town Center Task Force, and this committee have done. And so, obviously, we're gonna wanna emphasize what we just talked about, but that's all in the record of being requested by us and council affirming that that's what they want. So that is a part of the job description,
Right.
in
right.
writing already.
But what is the message to them? So they're seeing all.
Be
these
efficient.
documents.
Do this in the least amount of square footage, this is budget focused. This group's gonna review your space plans, you can't be excessive.
Okay, so all those square footages are different. So I would, as an architect, take the most current one.
Well, they're gonna start with a program, wouldn't they? They'll start with bodies, number of people and
That's in
uses.
the program already,
Mhm.
so that's,
And then they're gonna go back to staff
that's,
and,
yeah,
I think that's
I'm
right.
trying to find out what the process
Mhm.
is, as Paul envisions it after.
right. Well, I think it's here. I think that's what this covers, and it says they're gonna go back to staff, department by department, and make sure that the program still stands.
Okay, so Steve,
They're gonna go right
that's
back and find
part,
out the same
that's,
thing.
they're gonna validate the numbers we have. This is part of the problem that I see. The staff's gonna validate every number that's there,
Right.
and we may not need all of
A
that.
head count or square footage?
Square,
Head count.
square footage.
No, no,
Because the
it's
two
head
are
count,
different. Yeah,
it's
head count
only
is what
head
staff
count, And
validates.
then they're gonna program from that.
Yeah.
And they're gonna program from that. But
Yes,
that's gonna be
head
the
count.
same square footage as
Well,
what's already been
well,
talked
It
about.
might not be, because
necessarily.
supposedly they're
Because-
pitching us that they have prior experiences building libraries,
Yeah.
police departments, and city administration buildings. And it's not just, we're gonna do whatever your staff says. They're gonna say, we've done this a lot, we've worked with a lot of cities. And this is what and that's why we're, that's one of the reasons we care so much about prior experience, is that they will bring that expertise.
Just take the library, for example, because 3 of the 4 of us are here that went on the library committee. We started off, we said, we looked at a bunch of libraries, we came up with a number that was like 7,500 square feet, and it's gone creep, 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 now it's 9,000. How did it get to be 9,000? And it doesn't have a community room in it. Come on, it's something in the neighborhood of 8,000 to 7,500. And we said, okay, we'll validate that when the time comes. The time is coming, let's do it. Let's get on and let's look at this stuff ourselves and see where we are.
Phil, what would you recommend though? What would you do differently?
I've been trying to do this for a long time. Let's go back and look at the numbers that came up in the master plan and say, okay, what do we think? Because we do have the Blue Ribbon Task Force experience. It was a little bit bigger than that. We have the Town Center Task Force. And we went through and clawed down and tore down a whole bunch of numbers, and they're a lot smaller than these that we have right now. And let's see what the ones we think we ought to have.
And relative to this
It's-
RFP process, when should that happen?
It should have happened a long time ago, but I think we could do it pretty soon.
So would you,
During the thing.
should we?
So we give them a good number when they come back.
Right, because all I want to do is I try to want to be more than a mediocre chair. And try to stick to the agenda, which is we're reviewing an RFP that hopefully is poised to go out on a schedule we'd like to make. And the question is this something that, while the RFP's out there, do we go ahead and review the RFP, make very detailed comments, get it to an actionable state, and then at our next meeting, which we have very little agenda planned for, talk about what direction we want to give the architect on this? Or do we hold the whole process and rethink about what we've been saying we're gonna do? That's what I'm trying to struggle with on the agenda for today.
If I may direct the chair's attention to task 1.5.1 on page 4 of the
Right.
detailed scope of work. And I think that was, Paul and I, when we worked on this, came up with language that we think captured what you want, including peer review. But if it doesn't, we welcome your further suggestions, because,
Did you read that?
absolutely, be happy to. It's
So
on
it's
page,
the-
it's at top of page 4 of the detailed scope.
Looks like that.
Develop.
And it says, develop the administration dash police and library.
Why don't you wait a second, Gordon, let people get there. I think those people are scrambling to get there. It's probably the most important
Okay.
thing we're gonna
Page,
talk about today.
it's on this document, looks like this, you see it, page 4 at the top, and it says, develop the administration dash police and library programs along with any joint use facilities, and I think, Dee Dee, that's what, I think, my understanding what you're talking about. The police dash administration building will require careful prioritization of the program elements being specific rooms, specific functions, to stay in line with the budget. This should include a peer review, which is, Steve, what you had talked about previously, and detailed space analysis. The final configuration of the facilities must combine to meet the intent of a needs assessment in a functional and economical manner. So that's where we put in one, after the architects have looked at the previous program, they'd be able to get input from us, and then this is their output to meet the needs in a functional and economical manner. So if we didn't capture that correctly, I certainly
Or if
welcome
we wanna beef
the
this
words.
up.
Yeah,
I mean,
to
we can
augment
say,
that.
here's,
Well,
here's
this
the-
is just leading me to the point, another point, that I don't think
Yeah.
2 hours is enough to
Yeah.
interview each one of these architects.
Okay, well,
I'm sorry,
Okay.
there's a whole
So,
lot that we really need to
we need
drill
to-
down on.
okay. I think we need to
Okay, so
flip
those
the
are
police
good.
administration
Got it.
words. It needs to be administration police, because develop the administration, police, and library. The police administration building, it's the administration/police building.